And somebody's remembered to record this. Sorry, because I said I was going to. I completely forgot. Okay, so over to you, Mark.
Thank you, Mark. Yes, I remember to press the record button, which is good. Thank you, colleagues. I'll keep half an eye on the chat window at the bottom, but please do shout if you can't hear me or you have any questions on the way. So thank you, Mark, for inviting me to speak in this session. The talk is about carrying out participatory action research in a time of a global pandemic. I'm representing the ArcLight project, which has been going on for the last year, and I will be talking about what we've been doing, some of the challenges we've had, and some of the responses. But first of all, I come with questions. So I don't come to you as an expert who's saying this is how you do it. I'm more coming to you as a representative of the project who's been faced with a reality. So as well as trying to hopefully give you some insights into what we've done, I'll also be asking you questions. And so I've got a question for you, which I'm going to put up here in a minute. Let me see, ArcLight poll, has it come up? I'm going to come up with a question. I'm going to put a question box up with you later in the thing, where I'm going to ask you to think about what short-term and long-term responses or recommendations you think that we might be able to employ. So as the ArcLight project, we're faced with this pandemic, and we're trying to work out what we should do. And I'm really interested to get your perspective of what you think our approaches might be, or approaches that you've taken to respond to challenges around COVID. Okay, so ArcLight, a project affected by COVID. ArcLight is a project which has been exploring how community mental health resilience can be supported in Guyana. So we're a UK team. We have a research project manager in Guyana. We're working together and working alongside 3 communities to explore how communities might address challenges of mental health. We're trying to collect positive mental health stories, and our ultimate goal really is to help empower the communities and to also inform nursing curriculum in Guyana. Mental health care is stigmatized in Guyana, and healthcare funding is very limited. And so our colleagues on the project who come from nursing, and Mitchell, I believe, is in the audience, have recognised that it would be very valuable in Guyana to build a nursing curriculum to be able to help train healthcare workers working in community settings. And so the way we want to try and achieve that is to go to the communities themselves and work in a very participatory way to ask communities what their challenges are and find out people's stories about how they themselves have responded to challenges that they found in life, how they've overcome them, not just individually but in a community setting. We're drawing from Bronfenbrenner's socio-ecological framework, which takes into account the family, the environment, and these larger circles that we're all involved with. What we're doing is we're working with 3 different communities, and we've got hands-on workshops trying to draw out experiences, getting communities to think about challenges and how they've addressed them, how they've overcome them. And we're using Raspberry Pi computers, small portable computers, to collect and curate stories that the community members draw together using smartphones. So we're in communities where storytelling is very important and powerful. So we're collecting stories, we're getting people to record the stories, and we're curating, sharing these stories and using these as resources that can then help both the community themselves. They can share them. We've had film nights, and that they can also then inform the curriculum of the nursing community in Guyana. It's a very participatory approach, working with communities in their community settings. The project started last year. Then, of course, in February, a global pandemic struck. So we've had to respond to that. So what do we mean by participatory action research? Well, it's an approach to improving social practice by changing it. It's very much a social practice. It's getting people to work together. And so core for that is building trust with participants and nurturing close collaborations. Very important to build strong relationships. And we're seeking to establish self-critical communities, so getting people to reflect and think about what they do and how they might change behaviours to improve their situation and those of others. So objectifying their own experiences. So Anne Mitchell's referred to this as looking, thinking and acting. And of course, when we talk about that, we do refer to it as a cyclic action, so coming back again. And Andrea Berardi, who's part of the project team, has referred to it as planning, acting, observing, reflecting, and of course a cycle. Now, there's a lot of different resources that you can use and you can come across. I'm very fond, I've put a link up at the end to McTaggart's 16 Tenets of Participatory Action Research. It's an easy read, a website. I'd really recommend you go and have a look. And down the side you can see some of the examples of where you have workshops where people get hands-on. We've talked about using Raspberry Pis to collect together stories, and the bottom two pictures are two screenshots from two of them, one about youth employment in Indigenous village, Upakari, where we're working, one about a women's football team, where, again, a community response to mental health challenges, people coming together, and in a sports activity, finding solidarity and community and overcoming challenges in life. So we're generating these video stories, but still very much working in a hands-on way. And for some of the communities, it's been much more of a crafting exercise, a talking exercise, and working together with these different media. Oh, thank you, Rebecca. You're ahead of me. She's looked ahead and she's got a link. Well done. Interactive presentations, indeed. So that's the McTaggart resource. I really recommend it. So, seeking participatory action research. So you can see on the left-hand side a lot of things that we've been doing. Some of these are generic to many research projects, and some of them you can see emphasize the participatory aspect. So we're working together in very much face-to-face settings, using community tools, engaging people, using IT to help collect, curate, and share stories. And you can see how our ambition is to empower community, putting practices and ideas to the test, helping people reflect and build skills. And as you go down the screen, you see very much an emphasis on collaboration, on authentic participation, and record keeping, both not only acting and thinking, but recording and reflecting on what's happening. And very practical aspect is to create a practitioner's handbook, and thinking about how the outcomes and the dissemination of the project isn't just for academics or researchers, but can also support and be used by the wider community. So quite a range of activities that we've been carrying out through the project. Then, of course, COVID happens, and this throws a spanner in all our ambitions. I mean, it happened halfway through the project. We've made good progress with the project. Great things were happening, stories were being collected, communities were talking. We're really seeing some great stories, and Anne Mitchell might want to reflect at the end in the questions and answers session about some examples, but seeing some of the communities really blossoming and thinking and reflecting and working out ways that they might move forward. But for us, as a research project, the funder says you have the same timeline, but our fieldwork visits to Guyana have cancelled. Our planned evaluation approaches are disrupted. Our idea of carrying out a dissemination event in Georgetown in Guyana and bringing together stakeholders for a knowledge exchange workshop, somewhat similar to an evidence cafe, this was cancelled. And quite obviously, the participants had to focus on their immediate challenges, sustaining their families, keeping healthy, keeping employed. And so the whole lockdown situation that we had in the UK also happened, as I'm sure you're aware, globally. And so the same thing happened in Guyana, that suddenly people weren't free to meet or to continue working. So this was a real challenge for us. And this was further compounded in our situation by a rather chaotic national election. Elections in Guyana, unfortunately, can be quite problematic. And this one was definitely a difficult situation where there was a contested outcome between the two major parties. There was disorder, there was recount, a caretaker government's currently in place. So on top of all the lockdown and the healthcare concerns about the virus, and people were also being very cautious about moving around or engaging in case of disorder due to the unstable political situation. So ironically, of course, community mental health resilience is much more important than ever, and so we really felt that this was something we had to keep on doing, but we had to think how we could do this. This perhaps was compounded. You might say many of those situations you might find perhaps if you were doing a research project in your own country, 10 miles from your home, but for us particularly, the situation was compounded by the resource and distance challenges. So Guyana and UK, very different. We all know the planes stopped flying, so we couldn't visit. The time zone's different, so arranging meetings is a little bit more problematic when we're working between UK and Guyana. We have very dispersed and distinct fieldwork sites. We're working with a vulnerable community in Georgetown, survivors of domestic abuse. In Enmore, we're working with a community that suffered a lot of unemployment, and in the Mphahlele, which is very distant, right near the Brazilian border, we are working with indigenous communities and villages there. And so the telecoms infrastructure, both between the UK and Guyana, and particularly reaching out to Mphahlele, to the indigenous community, really had an impact. And Saraswati, I see, is in the session, who's joined IIT recently, so greetings. Has written this year talking about the challenges for COVID on the education sector in Nepal, and notes that without adequate infrastructure, inequalities between advantaged and disadvantaged peoples can be exaggerated, and this is certainly something we had to think about. So in the Mphahlele situation, for example, the indigenous communities dispersed from villages and moved out to forest, to tend forest gardens. So in that situation, people dispersed from villages. In Georgetown and Enmore, the community support groups couldn't meet. And of course, participants had their own existential pressures on time, income and health, and the research project wasn't perhaps their most important thing to think about. So what did we do? We had to think about how we were going to support the situation here. So one of the things that we had to think about was moving to an increased reliance on the local connections that we got and local champions. We were so lucky that we had a fantastic, or we still do have a fantastic local research and project manager, Carice Collins, working. So she became much, much more important. She was already a very key point for conversations with communities. She became her importance of a conduit, working out and reaching out to the communities, became greater. And so we had to work increasing our reliance on distance communication. So Anne Mitchell, Andrea Berardi having to communicate, often using very limited communication channels to the communities. And it's meant our evaluation approach has changed. Our communication challenges approach has changed to thinking, rather than evaluation, of observations and conversations informally and on-location interviews. We've had to think about remote conversations and using the research team and champions that we're still in contact with as expert witnesses who can report back on what they've seen, what they've observed, what they've found. And I should perhaps flag up our own Rebecca Ferguson's PhD, where she thought about epistolary interviews, so asynchronous interviews, and very much this is something we're thinking about using tools like Messenger, WhatsApp, so sending messages, getting a message back, so slower, small-paced communication. So rather than the kind of interview that you might expect or hope for as an interviewer, a Skype conversation, having to use what's appropriate, what the community is very comfortable with, what they're familiar with, what they've domesticated. In our case, WhatsApp and Messenger seem to be two tools which people are familiar with. We have to think about how these thinner communication channels can be used. And so very much working through intermediaries and having to think about what we can do with these slimmer channels of communication. So seeking the spirit of participatory action research. One of the big goals here is to build trust with participants and nurture collaborations. And of course, the risk of carrying this out remotely is you can have an emotional as well as physical distance, and the risk of losing the partnerships. The challenge, of course, is our funder still wants the results, and we have the academic pressure to deliver the papers and to carry out the work. But for a participatory action point of view, we're looking at longer-term benefits, and we're looking to transition theory and methods, what we've learned, to enable communities over time to take it on themselves, to become their own researchers, to become self-reflective and critical and develop themselves. So we're seeking co-production. So thinking of ways through that we can develop these kind of approaches and sustain over the long term. So what have we done? So again, I'm asking you to think, and I'm really interested in your feedback and your thoughts. What have we learned? I think it takes time to build trust and relationships, and using these thinner channels of communication, you have to allow for more time in communicating. You have to think about what's culturally suitable, what's most suitable for the communities, what they use themselves. And we've learned, how important it is to have a locally based researcher and to develop relationships with local groups that can continue through these difficult times. Now, Andrea Berardi's worked for nearly 20 years in the Upikari, for example. So we've been able to draw on that long-established relationship, and communities understand there are highs and lows and in long-term relationships, and building that longer view. Having a sensitivity to cultural and domain biases, so both being aware that different groups work in different ways, and when I mean different groups, I mean different groups of researchers, even amongst ourselves as a research team. And Eileen and several people in IET have thought very much on thinking about the biases we have as our different groups and our different academic disciplines, and also thinking when we're working across countries and working with different communities who have different ways of working and different priorities. And so finding time to build in, time to share and think about these reflections. Practically thinking of fallback ways of dealing with different communication channels and working. And I think one of the main goals for us is to think of ways that we can carry out more than helicopter research. So not just dropping in, doing our research and leaving, but thinking how we can support communities for the long term and sustain long-term relationships that benefit all parties and lead to self-reliance in the communities. So I'm going to finish there. And my question to you is, so we are a bunch of researchers and communities who have been faced, as we all have, with this dilemma, which may carry on. And I'm really interested. Do you think there's recommendations from your own practice of what we should do? What short-term or long-term recommendation would you have for the ArcLight team? So that's my final question to you to have a think about. I'm going to see if I can pull up the Adobe Connect pods. It all might go terribly wrong, such as live broadcasting. But have a think and put your questions your thoughts in the chat panel. So what do you think we should do as a project, given those contexts? Have you done something similar? I think we're all learning together here. And I'm really interested if you've experienced these things and if you've got any thoughts. And a really good resource to think about. I really enjoyed Deborah Lupton's work, doing field work in a pandemic. This is an online document. Somebody may find the link, but it's quite a snappy title that you find. And this has got a lot of methods and approaches that you might take. And she also hosts a Facebook group called Innovative Social Research Methods, and that's really interesting to drop into, and there's lots of community conversations around this challenge. And Rebecca's been ahead of me, thank you Rebecca, for pointing out the McTaggart link to 16 tenets of participatory action research. So that's my talk. Maybe I'll be brave and see if we can get the poll to work. I've got a terrible feeling I pressed something wrong, so I'll put the question up there. Thank you everybody. And over to you.
Thanks, Mark. Okay, we've got to move quickly on to the other presentation. So I want to give them each 20 minutes each. We're running a bit behind. So I'll thank you and then open up the next
Thank you.
Thanks. She's further down here. There we go. Oh, no, I've clicked on the wrong thing. This is why I should have perhaps done all this in, as you suggested, and do it all right, easily move. Put them all into one presentation. I thought I would be smart not to do this. And I was so close to clicking on the right thing. I can't.
I can keep talking. I can answer any questions if people have them while you're loading the next presentation.
Yeah, I'm
quite happy to take any questions.
Me while I'm not able to actually click on the.
It's a team effort, and I'm sure Charles may have some questions for you later, Mark.
Right. Why am I not being able to share this? It should.
Anne Jones asks if there's links to Deborah Lupton's work. Do I have a link for those who don't? Okay, we have a community chase to see who can find the link to Deborah Lupton's work. Rebecca's, I think, ready there already, probably.
My Adobe Connect has crashed. That's why I can't do anything.
Okay. Would you like to log out and log in again? We can keep talking. I can grab the slides from Teams, Mark, and we can get the next presentation up. Here we go. There we go. The wonders of the video lecture. So perhaps Asteria, would you like to come into the room and introduce yourself while Mark is loading the files? Would you like to open your web camera and speak and open your video? We have Asteria Nsamba next talking.
Yes, yes. Can you hear me?
Oh, we can hear you really well. I can hear you perfectly. Do you have a web camera, Asteria?
I tried it yesterday, but I couldn't manage.
No problem. We can hear you really well. So perhaps you'd like to introduce yourself while Mark's getting the slides ready. Tell us a little bit about yourself and your work.
Okay, all right.
So over to you, Asteria. Perhaps you'd like to introduce yourself, and we'll let you carry on. So thank you so much. I believe you're coming in from South Africa, so thanks for coming all the way to our online conference. Really look forward to your talk. Over to you.
All right. Hello, everybody. My name is Asteria Nsamba from South Africa. UNISA, the University of South Africa. I'm struggling a bit here. Okay.
Okay, Asteria, you're okay to go? It's just clicking the arrows at the bottom.
I'm trying to move my slides, but they keep going round.
Okay.
Would you like us to move them forwards for you, Asteria? You could just say when you'd like us to move the slides forward.
We seem to have lost her.
Yeah.
We can hear you, so do you want to just start talking and we will move the slides on for you?
Okay. Okay.
Okay. Right then, slide 1. There we go.
Yes. Yeah, a decade ago, 2 important predictions were made. One says 2 billion young adult cell phone users would use their phones to interact with instructors, peers, and content by the end of 2011. The other one says most college students in the United States of America would be studying online by 2040. These are 2 very innocent predictions. Then let's see what happens 10 years later. Now, 10 years later, let's combine the 2 into 1. Has the prediction come to pass? This is what we know, that the disruptive and contagious COVID-19 coronavirus, that's the word order there is not correct. I'm sorry about that. It's supposed to be coronavirus, has caused a closure of institutions globally. And as a result, institutions are compelled to take their teaching online to ensure continuity. This means that some form of technology should be adopted for this purpose. Too many breaks.
I think the problem is that there might be some lag, which means that when you click on it, it's the delay, and then we have a problem with the slides moving on too many times. So if you like, I will steer this. Hang on. So we want this slide, don't we? Okay, is that the correct slide, Asteria?
Yeah, this one is the correct one. Okay. Will you be able to do it that side?
Yes, I will. I will do them from now on.
Okay, could you please help me, because
yeah, it's a lag. It's just a lag problem. That's okay. That's all.
Okay.
Okay.
Right. Yeah. So this presentation is proposing that social networking tools and applications should be used to support students' learning during this time of COVID lockdowns and after. In South Africa, we have lockdowns. I think most countries of the world also have lockdowns, and almost all students are having their cell phones or some form of technology trying to study. So I think social networking tools, which are media platforms, Facebook, Twitter, WhatsApp, blogs, could help solve their problem. Most commonly used social networking tools are Facebook with 2.41 billion active users on a monthly basis, and WhatsApp with 1.6 billion, and Twitter with 330 million. Some educators use them for learning, and we are told that there is impact. There is research that has been done to show that there is impact when using this social media tools. The next slide. There are concerns, however, because these tools have not been designed for teaching and learning. They have been designed for the purpose of socialization, not really instruction, and also the violation of ethics and cyberbullying, which are quite common on social media. So these concerns have to be addressed if we adopt these particular tools into teaching and learning. So how do we address the concerns then? It means that their quality, this is what I suggest, that their quality should be assessed to determine their suitability in terms of content generation, information sharing, and learning collaborations. Another aspect that should be taken into consideration is the use of Bloom's theory. And also, educators should apply constructivist theory when designing activities. Okay, how do we adopt these now in learning? The first thing that I encourage all of us to do if we are to use these platforms is to assess their quality, the suitability of the selected tool by using what is called product quality, which is a perspective from marketing. Okay, these are the dimensions that could be used. Let's look at the features. We could sit with our students and look at the features, the characteristics of our social networking tools and applications, their reliability. We look at their conformance, the degree to which the product design and operating characteristics match pre-established standards, and durability as well. That is a measure of product life. The next slide. More dimensions could be used, like the speed of repair and the looks of the product well. This one will be according to individual preferences, really. Okay, so that's about the dimensions that we could use. Now, these are the reported characteristics of Facebook, what they offer. After looking at them, this is what they offer. Instant and easy message exchange. They have these. Therefore, we can use them in education. They allow conversations. Yes, all of them do allow conversations. The tool carries a lot of information. Talking about one tool, the tool allows formation of groups. The tool allows information exchange, allows attachment, allows exchange of video. So each of these tools would allow that. When it comes to character limit and essays, we have, they vary. There are those who are limitless, and one which is limited to 280 characters. Only short paragraphs for Twitter, and we can have essays if we want to use Facebook and WhatsApp. So by doing this, I thought that this could help educators who want to use Twitter to understand that, yes, they can use it, give essays, do certain things on those platforms. The next slide. Having seen the technology, let's now look at Bloom's taxonomy to guide the activities, because the activities are going to be on those particular platforms. Bloom's taxonomy is a very old guide, but very helpful, because it's a classification of learning objectives within education. It helps us understand the concept of learning, teaching, and assessment. I think I really recommend that it should be used, because it's very helpful. It's a very helpful tool. It divides objectives into 3 domains: cognitive, affective, and psychomotor. Okay, let's move. And okay, these are the levels. It has levels of learning. We have higher and lower. Evaluation. This is one original and revised. Evaluation, that is original, and creating will be the revised taxonomy. Synthesis, we evaluate, we analyze, throughout we apply knowledge, understanding, and we recall. Okay, let's go to the next slide. I think it will be clearer than this one, so that when we apply high order cognitive levels, when we design activities. When we design activities, we could design activities where there is creativity, where students will justify and debate, where they synthesize, they will be putting together things and composing and formulating and planning. There should also be analysis, where they will be comparing and identifying themes. These are the 3 high-order cognitive levels of Bloom's taxonomy. I'm sorry. Then we have, these are now low order, not low in the sense of really demeaning Bloom's taxonomy, but they are not as complex as the first 3. So we have applications where students could demonstrate and find solutions. Comprehension, where they illustrate and interpret facts, and recall, where they write and draw. Next slide.
Slide with effective levels. Asteria, can you see those? Okay, are we out of sync?
All right. Now the third aspect that should be applied when we use our networking applications should be social constructivism. This is a theory. The theory whose roots are found in the work of Leon Voski and John Dewey. And this theory emphasizes knowledge construction by students and teachers. So these tools are suitable for activities such as interactions, conversations, collaborations, and formation of learning communities. So when educators use WhatsApp, they use Twitter or Facebook, they should not just upload information. They should information like find huge information where a student is expected to work alone. There should be activities where there are collaborations, interactions among students. So these are my recommendations. Now in education, the choice of instructional tools should be based on whether such tools meet the goals intended by the educators. And the voices of the users of such tools should be considered. Any negative behavior such as cyberbullying should be discouraged. Thank you very much.
Asteria, that was excellent. There's yeah, and it's really I think that's a really useful area for anyone trying to move into social media. All of those things I think are things worth considering, particularly what are those different platforms useful for, and how do we use the best aspects of them to encourage the higher order learning. I think that's really useful stuff. Does anyone have any questions before we move on to the final? Asteria kept absolutely to time and has left 5 minutes for questions, so it'd be good if we had some. I've got one, unless anyone else wants to come in. When you're looking at these different platforms, do you also foresee perhaps that there's a longer term use to this, in that breakdown that you've got there could apply to any new social media platform that might emerge? So WhatsApp, Twitter and Facebook are the ones now, but is that future, do you think you could apply that to any social media platform? Do you think that would be of help to educators?
Yes, this guide can help any educator using any technology, actually, not only social media platforms, because one cannot be alone, on the computer. It's always, if you are learning, we need to collaborate and interact, and it will always be good to bring in issues of constructivism if activities are supposed to be designed with constructivism in mind. And also Bloom's taxonomy, those levels of complexity should be considered as well.
Mark's got a question. Do you want to come in with there, Mark?
Yeah, hi. Thank you, Asteria. Great talk. My question would be, you made a really good point about educators steering the direction of what is used, but also taking into account the user's preferences and desires. So can you tell us a bit about how you see we could manage the tension between those two things, when perhaps educators might have a different perspective from users who potentially could be younger people?
Can you come again, Mark, please?
Sure. Can you hear me okay? My question was that you made a point that we have to take into account our users' preferences and how they use the tools, but we also have the educators steering the process. So do you have any reflections on how you manage the balance between these two things, which might be move us in different directions?
Yes, like the previous presentation, my Charles, where he was talking about lectures, being a one-man show. Nothing should be a one-man show. Students and educators should collaborate to decide on the tool, what tool to use. Even if maybe it's the institution should decide that this is the tool that we are going to use for our learning and teaching in this particular space. So I think if we collaborate, sit together and decide on the tool, voices from educators and students are supposed to be heard.
Thank you. Thank you. Yeah, I think it's interesting to find a way of getting all the voices heard, for sure. Thank you.
Thanks, Asteria. That was really interesting. I think the stuff I'd kind of like to follow up on as well, so I'll be emailing you over the next few days.
Thank you, colleagues, for giving me this opportunity. This is my first time.
Oh, really? Oh, okay.
Yeah, this is my first time at this conference. Thank you very much.
Slides and things. Thank you, Asteria. That's excellent. Okay, we're going to take a 5-minute break now, because we had a chat amongst the rest of the committee, realising that we were going to allow longer time for handover between these sessions. So that gives us a time to sort things out here, but also gives you time to take a short break. So we'll be back at 5 to in 5 minutes. So if we're ready to go in 5 to, then Mpine and Sheila will then be able to do their presentation. So hopefully that will just be long enough for you to take a break before we get into the next session. Mpine, can we have
Yes,
a,
I want
can
to
you just
set
say
up.
something to
Can
make
you
sure
set
that
up?
we're...
Okay.
Yes, yeah, absolutely. We've
Sheila,
got 5
let's
minutes.
set up so that when we start, we don't have the issue.
Okay, Prof. Thank you. Can you hear me clearly that side?
Come to the. We can share the stage
Yeah,
here
very
because
well.
we are doing it together.
Yeah, you can have both videos running.
And then we want to upload the presentation.
It should be there.
Presentation. Start sharing. Oh yeah, there we go. Yeah, it's fine.
And you can
Everything is
scroll
fine.
through, it's okay. Okay.
Sheila, where are you?
I'm on the screen.
Oh, okay. I see me. I don't see you.
We don't see Sheila,
I
so...
don't see myself. Oh, I didn't start sharing. That's why.
Yeah, it has to be the second button, yeah.
So, yeah.
Hey!
So that,
2 clicks. It's 2 clicks.
Wonderful.
so that there are no issues.
Okay.
So when they come back from tea, then we are fine.
Yeah, brilliant.
Okay.
You can always, if you roll your mouse over your video screen, you can see there's a pause button. So if you need to pause your video for any reason, you can just change it to a single image rather than playing video.
No, we kept it simple. We kept it simple.
But it looks great.
These things are really, they can really create problems for you. So we kept it.
Keep it simple. I think my expression for this year is complexity happens. I think whatever you do, however simple you think it's going to be, it somehow gets complex.
True.
Okay, I'm just going to get a glass of water.
All right.
Thank you for setting up.
Let's just go get something to drink as well.
Hi Sheila, it's
Hello?
Hi Sheila. It's it's a bit strange, isn't it? Because you can't actually see the audience, so sometimes you feel like you're talking to yourself. It's quite disconcerting. I gave a 2-hour talk, a workshop, and I just had 2 hours of talking to a picture of myself and looking at the chat window. It's a really odd experience.
And sometimes
we have tried it with all the videos
like
running.
people should respond.
Yeah, it's you just don't get that human feedback. We've tried it with all the video cameras running, but of course when all the video cameras run, it really slows down the connection. So we get them switched off. But I must admit, when I was in my long student workshop, I just, after a while, I thought, am I just talking to myself? You know, are they all gone? So, but we can see you really clearly. So,
Okay.
thanks.
I'm going to mute myself.
Just get a glass of water and
Prof is going to start.
Yes, all need a coffee. I have actually done a conference where I found out at the end of my presentation everyone else had left halfway through. So it can happen. But yeah, anyway. Okay, so hopefully everyone's back from their breaks. We did say 5-2 and it's not quite then, so we'll just make sure we stick to what we promised. And then we'll be ready to go. Looks like there's still quite a few people in the list. Okay. Right. Okay. So, can you start off just by giving a brief introduction about who you are? I know, Mpine, you were at the OU for a while, so that would be interesting to hear about as well. So, okay, over to you two and your presentation. Thanks very much.
Thank you very much for the kind introduction. My name is Mpine Makoe. I'm with Mphahlele, and we are going to be talking about a project that we are working on right now that started as a response to COVID-19. Both of us come from the University of South Africa, so since the context is a bit different, I just wanted to introduce what the University of South Africa is the oldest dedicated distance teaching university, because that's the first distance education university that in the whole world that started in 1946. But before that, it was an examining body for the University of London. So from 1873 to 1946, it was an examining body. And from there, the university itself has been, I call it a grandmother of all distance teaching universities, because whoever wants to start distance teaching comes to UNISA for advice, including the Open University, by the way. They came to UNISA for advice and all the things that goes with it. It's still the largest in the continent. We have close to or more than 400,000 students. Our alumni include 2 Nobel Peace Prize winners. We always are very proud of that we have alumni who are Nobel Peace Prize winners, especially in the context where distance teaching in the continent is considered as a substandard. The other issue is that we graduate a third of South African students, including for teachers it's even higher. Almost 60% of the teachers have gone through UNISA programs. Now, the reason that we are here, especially to present here, is our concern for COVID-19. And why are we concerned about education access in COVID-19? Almost every country, every institution is trying to ensure that students continue to learn even during the lockdowns. 1.6 billion students in the world are forced to stay at home. And all of a sudden, online became very, very popular, when for many years people had ignored it. They didn't even want to hear about it, and all of a sudden, everybody wants to do it. Now, part of the reason we are concerned, because if students do not study or they're not being kept busy, there'll be increased dropout rates, especially in developing countries where we have made so many inroads in terms of ensuring that we increase the literacy rates and all that. And then there's also issues of infrastructure. In developing countries, there's a big problem with infrastructure, connectivity, and even South Africa, which has the highest in the continent, is still quite low when compared with other developing contexts. So COVID, of all things, what it brought to the fore is the digital divide. The digital divide is so great, especially for people who are in rural communities, in remote communities. And the most important part is that there's lack of competencies to teach in an online environment, because people have never been interested in teaching in an online environment. Now, in South Africa, we find that in a classroom setting, people understand what to do. The lecture that Charles was talking about, they are very clear on what they do. But what we have seen increasingly is that because teachers now, and we call them in South Africa educators, teachers find themselves having to be forced to move to an online space. And what they do in an online space, especially teachers from primary and secondary school, or even all teachers, they have lectures, the Zoom lectures. So you'll find kids as young as 10, 14, sitting in front of a computer all day, watching their teachers trying to teach. And we all know that it's the context plays a very critical role. It's in their homes, and all of a sudden they are expected to learn from something that they usually use for games and other things. And it's a very boring way of doing things. Now, what we did with this intervention, and we had to act very quickly to come up with ways in which teachers can be empowered, or can be at least skills, or understand what online learning is all about. So in an online teacher teaches students at a distance, that doesn't see them, they are very far from them, and this is something that had to be done at a speed overnight. They were told that now you need to take your whole classroom to an online space. And they don't have any clue, they are not competent in doing that. So this is where we came in with our intervention. And we are using an action research methodology, because we identified the problem of teachers who are trying to teach without the necessary knowledge of how to do it. And then we implemented the process, and we started doing the research on that. So the purpose of this intervention is to equip educators with the necessary knowledge and skills that they need to teach online. And you'll realize that in COVID, things have to be done very, very quickly. And other things is to explore how knowledge is presented in an online learning environment, so that they understand how to do that, and how to explore social networks, which will be used as a support learning, to support learning. So what we did in towards end of April, we looked at OERs, open education resources, from all over, just to see an open education resources that talks about how to teach online. So very quickly we did that, and we identified two. One of them is from Open Learn, taking your teaching online, and another one is from the OERU, which is the digital literacy. As we are looking at the teaching online, we realized that we cannot start them with teaching online when they don't even know how to navigate in the digital space. So the digital literacy course assisted them to navigate in the digital space. Then we saw that we packaged that, but immediately we realized that if we put OERs out there and expect teachers to interact with them, they won't do it. One, it's an environment that they're not familiar with, and then you try to get them to be involved in something that they're not familiar with. It creates problems in itself. So what we did now was to bring in mobile learning, because many of our students have mobile phones, and we used a platform that they are familiar with, platform that they use to communicate with their friends, to do things with other people. So the way we structured the support system on WhatsApp was that we did it in two phases. It was one tutor support, where an e-tutor like ourselves can come into that space to help them as they go through the learning material. And the second one is the WhatsApp. The second one is the peer-to-peer support. However, we emphasized peer-to-peer support, and we said every student who registers in this course. And when we started this course, we didn't even expect that many people will attend. But in 2 weeks after sending emails asking people if they would be interested, more than 300 students, 300 participants wanted to come in and participate in this course. So we realized that with those numbers, there's no way that we can have a tutor who supports each one of them. So we made it that they would be supported first in the group space, because people don't learn at the same time. So those who have learned something quicker than others, especially in the digital literacy skills, a course where there's a lot of skills that needs to be learned, whoever that has learned before then is able to help other groups. So it's like a study group. So groups would be like in 7, 6, and 7, and Sheila will talk about that a bit later. And then the tutor supports the group, not individuals. So that way the tutor is able to support the groups that we have formed in WhatsApp. So the purpose here was to ensure that the support continues so that they don't drop out because they don't get any assistance. And I have mentioned that we use 2 open education resources, the digital literacy course and the teaching online, how to teach in an online environment. And what we did, this was purely for content. So we looked at this for cognitive support, because they also have activities and they have a whole lot of things that students can go through. They have videos, activities, assignments, all the things that the students need to go through. However, as they are going through, they need affective support, which is what we were trying to do when we got into using WhatsApp. So to support students, there are a variety of areas. They need to be supported technically to address technical difficulties, which they met quite a lot when they were doing the digital literacy course, because the digital literacy itself has so many hurdles that a student needs to go through before they can be comfortable in a digital working space. And many of them would have given up if we didn't have the WhatsApp. Then we also focused on building communities. So when students register for a course, we made sure that we have an orientation program, an orientation workshop, that initially we did it with Zoom, and now we are introducing the big blue button, where we come in and it's not a long thing. We sit and then we talk to them about what the course is all about, what is our expectations, what is WhatsApp, and how are they going to use it. So the idea there is to open dialogue between students, and students being aware that they need to work with each other. Then the other one is the peer networks and support, where we allow them and provide a safe space, and so that students can work collaboratively to assist each other. And that we emphasize it, that in an online environment, it's important for people to talk to each other, to support each other. Because if you don't do that, and remember, educators, our teachers, are used to doing things on their own. So even when they teach, it's the teacher in front. So we were avoiding that they would have to feel that we need to be their teachers, and we will not cope with the numbers. And again, we wanted this program to scale, because if we don't scale it, then it defeats the purpose of what we are trying to do. And the other thing that we're going to use when we were looking at the data that emanated from the WhatsApp groups, the orientation and the reflection group that we also have. So the WhatsApp, the reflection, it's what we meet with the student once a week, and then this WhatsApp is a continuous thing. So and then we looked at this in terms of the community of inquiry framework. And as we were analyzing data, and looking at what is it that each space is trying to address, we found that we are missing one point, which is the learning presence. So we are going to do it, because this is we are using action research methodology. So we have identified the problem, we've developed and implemented an intervention, and now we are gathering data. And as we are gathering data and analyzing it at the same time, because we are analyzing sets of data at the same time, we realize that there's something here that is missing in relation to what students need to do and their role. So I'm going to leave this to Sheila to go through the process of the methods that we use to collect data. Over to you, Sheila.
Thank you so much, Prof. Colleagues, let me greet you once more. It's very cold in South Africa today, but the weather is good. Colleagues, I'm going to take you through how we collected data in this massive project, which started 2 months ago. It doesn't even have 3 months already, but it's so huge that we feel like we've been doing it for a very long time. So when we were busy working in this project, we realized the following data collection tools that are really collecting tools for us. The first one being an email. To me, I never thought I can one day call an email a data collection tool. But as we were working through this project, I realized that it can collect valuable data. So firstly, what we did, we sent an email to some of the UNISA lecturers on the 23rd of April to ask them to provide us with email addresses of their markers, because UNISA contract teachers who are working in schools to become contract markers to mark the scripts of the students. Remember, Prof. Makoe indicated that we have got more than 400,000 students. So as lecturers, we are unable to keep up with the marking of the scripts of those students. Then we outsource the marking to teachers who are being contracted. So initially we received about 190 email addresses from those lecturers, and then we sent an invitation to those 190 prospective participants on the 24th of April. And then one of our colleagues sent an email to the district officials in the province of KwaZulu-Natal, and they spread the word again through their WhatsApps and their word of mouth. Before we know it, in about 3 days, we collected about 300 email addresses from the interested participants. Why are we saying this? We saw this as a data collection tool is because when they were sending emails, we could get messages of interest and messages of excitement, some even indicating how they are looking forward to solve some of the problems they are foreseeing in this COVID-19 lockdown. So we decided that we couldn't just start with the 300 participants. Then we started with 50. And then we decided that we're going to commence the course on the 1st of May 2020 with a group of 50 participants. So the plan was to every week to add 50 more participants. So another collection tool we used was the online registration form, because after getting those emails, we realized that we need to know who are these people, actually what are their qualifications, what are their level of digital literacy. So we designed an online form which served as a registration form for the project, and then we gathered that information. Actually, it helps us a lot, because one of the main things that we needed to collect from these participants was their contact numbers, so that we could create the WhatsApp groups that Prof has been indicating that we used to support them. So for the first cohort, we had 53 participants, because we aimed for 50, but we realized that at that time, let's start with the 53. And we sent the link for the online form. Unfortunately, only 34 have completed the registration form on the 1st of May when we were about to start. And then we created 5 WhatsApp groups of 6 members each, but one group had 8 members. But before the end of that week, 19 remaining participants completed the registration form. And then they indicated that some of them, they were unable to access the link. That's why they couldn't register on time. So they were allocated the e-support member, and then other e-support group members were just included in the support group for the extra support. So the other collection tool was the workshops, because after now getting them into the WhatsApp group, like Prof has indicated earlier, we thought that even though the courses are online, they need some kind of orientation to familiarize them with the courses so that they know what to expect from the courses. So we designed the orientation presentation, and then we met them on Zoom, the 53 participants. That day, it was the most exciting day, because most of them during that time, they shared with us to say they were having the online meeting for the first time in their lives. And then the other collection tool being an online reflection. As the course progressed during the week, we realized that we need to get their experiences, how they experience the courses and the support. So we designed another online form for reflection purposes, so that we got feedback from them as to how they experienced the course. Again, we received about 27 responses of that form instead of 53. And then we realized that others might be experiencing some problems. And then we thought, for us maybe to get this information from them, we said, let's organize a workshop. Again, the workshop, we called it Progress Report Workshop. Then during that workshop, that's where we discovered that some of them were still far behind with the course, so they were afraid of the negative exposure. That's why they didn't want to complete the form. Then I'm coming to the data analysis. We went back to our a theoretical framework, which is community of inquiry, to say this data, we can arrange it according to the elements of community of inquiry, which is social presence, cognitive presence, and teaching presence. So with regards to social presence, we identified that the main challenges that were reported by the students was to the struggle with creation of their login details. I'm just going to quote one of the participants who said on the WhatsApp group one day to say, "Good morning, please, I'm struggling to complete Wiki Educator for registering. It keeps on saying wrong email password. Which one should I use?" So this participant was asking others to say, which password can I use? Because when we looked at such posts, you can understand that this person, even though he or she created his or her own password, but still think other people can know that password. That's why it's asking others to say, which password can I use? So they also reported that their peers were quite helpful in assisting them to overcome many of the early hurdles they encountered. They were able to explain how to solve problems in a simple way. Others would say, I got it, but I don't know how I got there. I'm quoting again one of the participants who was most helpful to them. The post was saying, colleagues, it's so much fun working on Mastodon site because you also get to see people's tweets. You can comment, you can like the tweets, you can retweet, just like you do on Twitter. So the digital literacy course, according to our analysis, equipped the teachers with skills of navigating the online space, and they were happy when they could develop things like blogs and creating accounts on other social networks such as Mastodon, because they were not even familiar with it. Some of them, they were even able to get some emojis on the WhatsApp, and that showed us how excited they were. So with their cognitive presence, our participants on the course side, they acquired some digital skills. And just to name a few of the things that they were learning from the courses, they were able to establish the personal digital learning environment. They were able to create blogs and link their blogs to the course URLs. They were also able to create other social media networks that they were not familiar with. And then they were able to use discussion forums. Some of them didn't even know what a discussion forum is and how to post on the discussion forum. And again, most importantly, they were able to find and select open resources on different search engines. With the teaching presence, we also observed that the participants had a lot of expectation, and some of their expectations were met according to their posts on the WhatsApp and according to their feedback we got from the progress report workshop. But others, at some point, they were not unsure as to whether the course will assist them to achieve their goals. I'm going to quote again one of the participants when he or she said, "I'm finding myself going back and forth." So we encourage them that take your time to read the course concepts and instructions. That is when some became enthusiastic and they shared in the WhatsApp group that they were breaking to their family members that they can blog and tweet. But few of the participants confidently posted their experiences on a daily basis, especially what they did and how they did it. One member in the WhatsApp group too, I still remember very well, kept on putting his team members on their toes by telling them how to create, for example, a blog and expect them to report their experiences the next day. One morning, because he's a male person.
Sheila, we are running out of time. We have long been.
I'm finishing.
After 5 minutes.
Okay. No.
So please wind up now.
Yeah, I'll be done in 5 minutes.
Because there's some.
Okay.
Not in 5 minutes, Sheila. We are over time.
Oh, sorry.
We are over time.
Sorry, Prof.
Yeah, please.
Apologies. Let me just wrap up by saying the keynote speaker, Charles, you are challenging us to think that the video lecture as one of the tools we might include when we repurpose the course to the South African context. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Yeah, we did slightly overrun. Interesting stuff. So, and Martin's just now, I think, ready to go. So thanks very much. I'll be in touch with more things to talk to you more about, because I think in some of the chat we had previously before this through email, there was a lot of, we could see a lot of overlap in some of our experiences and some differences, obviously, but it would be really interesting to follow that up. Okay, did you have anything else you wanted to just finish with, Mpine, to just round everything up, or?
All right. Okay. Because we are running so much out of time. Sorry we took too long. But just this one quotation comes from a student, one of the participants, who just said we were totally locked down in level 5 for COVID-19, and anyone can read that. And also this has actually helped her to learn something new that they don't know. The project is ongoing, and we hope that it is scaled. There are a lot of people who are interested in it and will continue to work on it. And since it's action research, we'll come back with more results as we go along. Thank you.
Great, thank you. Great, that's excellent. Thank you. Brilliant, really interesting. And hopefully we can stay in touch longer in the future. And some brilliant Albie Toffler. I looked through the presentation, thought, wow, that's great. Some Albie quotes there to finish with. But these will all be available online as well for people to take a look at and then see your particular summaries. So thank you very much, both. And all in all, a really interesting session from all our presenters. So, yes, round of applause for everyone. So thank you, and we'll now move on to our next session. Thank you. Okay, so Martin's here, and we're ready for the book launch. So if Mark wants to take over and then introduce Martin, and then we'll be into the book launch section.
Can't hear you, Mark.
Yeah, that's it. Very good in punk rock. Even did that. So X-Ray Specs, what a fantastic band, and a good 70s hint there. So over to Martin. Thank you very much, Martin, who's going to talk about the book launch. The book he's just had published. Thank you to all the speakers in the previous session. We've had a great morning. Some of you will be going off to lunch soon, but first of all, Mark is going to tell us about his new book. So over to you, Mark.
If you mean Martin, you're Mark, I'm Martin.
Okay,
yeah, cool. So I'm not...
Yes. Two, I think. Time for me to get off the stage, definitely. Martin Weller, over to you.
My brother's name was Mark, and my mother was... You said my mum, Martin. So hi, everyone. Yeah, I'm not going to talk for 45 minutes about my book, but just to sort of fill a bit of the lunchtime slot. So I was at a book club published called 25 Years of EdTech, and I'll sort of take you through some of that. And the good thing is that it's free. I do have percentage. So I toyed about with different titles for this book. So I worked with Brian Mathers, who some of you may know from Visual Thinkery, on some graphics for it. We talked about, the first 25 years are like the kind of the teenage years of the internet, if you like, in terms of educational technology. It's like, and the point of I'll come on to the approach in a minute, but the point of the book was that it sort of covered that kind of internet phase. But I wasn't sort of saying that all of educational technology only started with the internet, because as we know well in IET, that's not the case. But also, interestingly, kind of since the pandemic, I think it's actually been interesting to sort of think about how I'm sure a lot of you have been seeing these kind of hot takes online about, can you do online communities? Can you create learning communities online? Like, will online learning work? It's like as if like the past 50 years haven't happened with the OU, or the past 25 years haven't happened. So one of the things I want to do just at the end is to think about how, none of this bit isn't in the book, but how having some kind of knowledge of our history in education technology is a useful thing in the current setting. So the book is published by Athabasca University Press. It's Creative Commons license, so the digital copy is free, so you can download it and adapt it. So that's the link there if you want to go and download a copy, or you can buy a copy. Feel free to buy the physical copy. And say Brian Mathers worked on the graphics with me. And there's some nice interactive bits at the end that I'll point you to that you can go and play with. So so you'll notice that there's different versions of the cover on each slide, and you can remix your own version of that. So I'll point you to that, so you can change the colour of the hair and the background and the face and what it says above the glasses and what the bit down, the text down below says. So free graphics for all your presentations. So why did I decide to write this book? Well, I'm the president of ALT, the Association for Learning Technology, and in 2018 it was their 25th anniversary. So I thought a fun thing to do would be to write a blog series of 25 years of EdTech, just taking one technology for each year and using that to kind of talk about sort of more general themes as well, but also kind of a fun thing to do. So I started doing that and then regretted it when I got to about sort of 2007, and I still had to slog on for a bit. But actually, it was a very useful process, and I enjoyed writing it. And then once I'd written the blog series, it seemed like a good idea to kind of build it up a bit, use it as the basis, but also kind of add more to it to make it into a book, because lots of people like the blog series. So why write the book? I think there were a number of things that made me want to write it. Those of us in education technology, for want of a better phrase, which is a broad term, know that actually people come into it from different places. The example I often give is, if you're at a chemistry conference and you sit down at lunch with like 4 strangers, you probably know that most of them have a chemistry PhD. But if you're at an ed tech conference and you sit down at lunch with strangers, then people there might have, computer science, psychology, philosophy, history, any type of degree. So that people come into it from other places. And I think that's a real strength of it. It gives it kind of a real richness. But often it means that people don't have this kind of shared basis of knowledge. And so I wanted to kind of provide at least one basis for that. But I think more importantly was I got fed up of all these, particularly around MOOCs. There's a lot of these kind of media pieces about, how we MOOCs were the internet happening to higher education, and now it was going to be disrupted and all this kind of stuff. And the story it's always put, there was an article written like, can universities survive the digital age, as if it was some kind of extinction event coming for universities. And it was always pitched that universities are too slow to change, they're incapable of change, and they don't know how to innovate. And so I wanted to demonstrate a kind of history of innovation that's happening in higher education, and some ways to kind of refute that Silicon Valley narrative. That's the only way you get change to happen. And I wanted to draw out some of those themes and lessons by looking across different technologies, but also to highlight the necessity of having a critical approach, not just to kind of accept any technology that comes along, but because we've learned things over these number of years, how to think about those things critically. And so I think, overall, to provide this kind of alternative history, I think in education technology, both within universities, but also in sort of the business, if you like, the industry of it, there's this kind of year zero mentality where everything's only just been invented. So when, you may remember when MOOCs came along, everyone said like, finally, online learning is happening. And as some of you may know, not only the OU, but I launched a big OU course fully online in 1999 with 15,000 students. But apparently, 2012 was when online learning was finally happening. So I kind of wanted to kind of refute that narrative. So these are the things. So it actually goes from 94 up to 2018. And I sort of picked out mostly technologies. Occasionally there's like a pedagogy like Constructivism or a trend. So 2018 EdTech's dystopian term. I'm not going to go through all 25 years. You can argue about which ones should have been included and which ones shouldn't have been included and where they can be placed. It's like a 100 best films of this century kind of list. It's much about what's not included. But I think there's probably something in there for everyone. So don't get angry if your thing isn't in there or it's underrepresented. I think I've got a keynote coming up next week. I'm talking about this, and that's made me sort of reflect on some of this. And I think, I did this in the book, but I think you could kind of divide it into 3 kind of phases, if you like. There's the kind of optimistic phase. So a lot of that stuff around constructivism, the use of the web in education, wikis, and e-learning in general were kind of really characterised by people thinking, what can we do that's new and exciting with this stuff? And so people were really excited about the possibilities of non-linear text, for example. We don't think about it now, but hyperlinking was amazing. So we don't need to construct everything in a linear fashion. And it really made people reflect on how we teach and what we do. So I think that kind of early stage is like optimistic. Then you get the kind of mainstreaming phase from maybe 2000 onwards. Then I think around maybe MOOCs onwards, you get what you might call the kind of pessimistic or the dystopian phase, I think, where although people are still interested, for each of these things people are beginning to realise there are kind of some serious issues associated with them. So I think learning analytics are a good example. We know they can be very beneficial, but also they kind of play into that whole kind of privacy issue and surveillance and monitoring of students stuff. So there are kind of a darker side to a lot of this, I think. And I think it's interesting to see that kind of to a change in tone of much of the stuff around this. So I just want to, so they're the technologies. Go away and read the book if you fancy any of those. This bit isn't in the book, but I think it's interesting. What is it? Why is it interesting in the time of a pandemic? I was joking on Twitter that I never thought that being an education technologist would be a kind of emergency service, and that I was saying that I want to be like one of those cops who hangs from a helicopter and says, "I'm getting too old for this shit. One last job." And so Brian Mathers drew me this picture of him parachuting in. But it's kind of felt a bit like that. It's suddenly, who would have thought that educational technology is the strike squad you need? But now that everyone's kind of pivoted online, you've seen this a lot, I think, particularly in campus-based universities. So I think some kind of knowledge of our history is interesting because suddenly EdTech is now very relevant. It's always been relevant, but suddenly all universities are sort of doing some form of online learning. And I wrote a blog post the other day about how I think what you're seeing is lots of senior management in campus universities have spent their lives pitching their campus experience as the thing that's really valuable, and suddenly they're having to deal with being an online university. And it's a problem they don't really want, and they desperately want someone to come along and say, we have the magic button, you press this magic button and we can put all your learning online. And actually, the truth of that is that it's quite, it's never that easy, and of course it's quite boring and it takes a long time, you have to invest in staff and all those kind of things. So I think having some kind of knowledge of what you're being sold will be really important for people. And to understand what's been done before, what worked, what hasn't, and why those things did work or didn't work. So I'm going to give a couple of examples for that. So I think an example for that is, I saw an article the other day, someone saying as we've all pivoted online, we can't do exams anymore. Now's the time for blockchain for assessment. It's always blockchain for X is the solution to everything. Some of you may remember, I think it was Philip Hammond's saying that blockchain will be the solution to the Northern Ireland border come Brexit. He didn't know why, but he was sure it would be. So the pitch they're making is that we can't have exams, and exams have been shown to be a kind of real weakness in the system. You need to get all these people together for one big chunk of assessment, and if that fails, then the whole course falls down in many ways. You haven't been assessing them all along. So the pitch for blockchain for assessment is that we can now collect smaller bits of assessment all the way along, and someone can keep them. Okay, yeah, that might well be true. That might be a useful thing to do, but we can already do that through portfolios. So if someone comes to you pitching blockchain as the way to do this kind of smaller chunks of assessment, then you should at least be able to ask, okay, what does it do that e-portfolios don't do? And e-portfolios have been moderately successful, but they haven't completely changed all assessment across all universities. And the issues to do with that are nothing to do with technology. The technology works fine. There are much more to do about recognition, employers valuing e-portfolios, those kind of things, and changing your assessment and the structure to deal with, to be structured around what an e-portfolio does, kind of lots of smaller tasks. And so how is blockchain going to overcome those problems that e-portfolio faced as well, the kind of more social problems? So I think that's an example of why at least having some knowledge about your history would be useful to the kind of snake oil salesman. Another one is, so some of you may remember learning objects sort of around the year 2000. The idea was we'd have these reusable pieces of educational content. And the argument for learning objects is actually really good. It's like, why are we all creating the same content over and over again? We could just have 4 or 5 versions of it that you can take and adapt and reuse. But they didn't work because they were kind of over-engineered. There wasn't really a market. They required a lot of effort to create, and there was kind of no real benefit to you to creating them. And so they sort of petered out. And they sort of then adapted into becoming open educational resources, particularly open textbooks, which were a bit more understandable, I think. But you'll see now some people saying what we need is kind of cooperative university production. So they're not using the term learning objects, but they're talking about shared content between all universities, because suddenly all universities need to be online. So that really creates a market for this kind of stuff. And you can imagine that national governments, probably not ours, would say, why don't we invest in this? And that'd be a kind of really productive use of our money. So the argument might well recur again, in that case, you'd need to know what were the problems the first time round, why weren't learning objects successful despite there being a good argument for them, and how might you overcome those arguments. Another example might be the VLE or LMS. And I think there's been this sort of rush to use Zoom and those kind of things online. But actually, most institutions already have a VLE that's perfectly good to deliver online courses. So the problem isn't the technology. The problem is knowing how to use it effectively, but also not become so entrenched in your one technology that you can't see beyond it. And that's been the criticism of the VLEs, that we implemented them and then everything became not how do we realise this in online learning, but rather how do we realise it in our VLE. And so people kind of stopped being allowed to think outside of the VLE, as it were. So if you're going to put more effort into your VLE and that's going to become your main platform, then how do you make sure you've got stepping stones beyond it? So the conclusions I drew in the book is that there is this kind of long history of edtech innovation in education. And so it doesn't need saving from these external agents. But also I think understanding this history is essential to making good decisions right now. Here's the fun stuff. So you can download the book there. I created a sort of complimentary site on my website called, we can go to edtechie.net/25 years, and I've created a timeline there where you can sort of play around with the years. And you can download all the images which are CC licensed. There's even a Spotify playlist for 25 years for edtechs. You can go and remix the cover there, which is good fun. And the people at Hypothesis put a version of the book up, which you can then go and annotate with Hypothesis, so you can sort of comment on it and make it much more of a kind of living document. That's quite fun, actually. So feel free to interact in any of those ways. Did I put a final slide up? I think so. That is my final slide. So there you go. I'm happy to answer any questions about if you're interested in either the content of the book or even just the kind of publishing process.
Thanks, Martin. Really interesting talk through it. Very fond of blockchain getting mentioned there as the solution to everything. I see Fernando suggests all sorts of political options there. So I'm just hosting here. I'm very fond of the X-ray specs and the remix. I think it's a really interesting sort of index of the things that have happened over the time. I wonder if anybody's got any questions they'd like to put to you. There's a few things coming up in the chat window, so let's just have a quick look at the chat window and thank Martin for introducing his book. Cheers.
I'll do the cheesy shot.
Oh yeah. Well, hold on there. I'll do a screenshot, so we've got it on record, eh? So. Hold it up, then I'll do a screenshot.
All right.
Thank you. Yeah, indeed. Mpine says great book and timely, and yeah, I mean it's very.
Hope you're doing well.
Yeah, Mpine, come in. Say hello to Martin. Don't be shy. I think you've terrified them, Martin.
Can I?
Oh, there's Mpine.
Hi,
hello, Mpine.
Hi, how are you?
How are you?
All right. It's so good to see
good, thank
you.
you.
It's good to see you in your own world, and I'm in my own world. Usually we meet in other people's worlds.
That's right, we never meet. Yeah, we always meet other places. That's good.
Yeah, well done. This
It looked cold.
really good and timely.
Yes, I think it is. It's strangely timely, yes. It wasn't meant to be, but I think it is.
And
quite
all of a sudden you are a superstar. For years you've been talking about this, and then all of a sudden some strange disease from somewhere has made you a superstar.
Well, I think it's true of everyone working in ed tech. Suddenly, like, they've had their vice chancellors knocking on the door. Excuse me, we need you now. We need the emergency services. So it's been a strange time.
True. No, good to see you. Good.
And
I think Fernando had a question. Do you want to jump in? Yeah, yes.
Yeah, can you hear me? Yeah, let me just move my microphone. There you go.
Hi,
Hi
Fernando.
Martin. Long time no see. I was wondering.
Going well at Coventry?
Yes, except in the current circumstances, the masters I've been teaching at it's not going to run, and so if anyone knows of a job, please let me know. But that's not my question.
That's the most important. Like, let's get that call out for Fernando's work. Yeah.
No, what I've been really thinking about, all this move to online learning and the whole people thing or not people thing, and I kind of really worried about the OU. I think, in the short term, this could be very good for the OU. But in the long term, I wonder if the OU might really lose its unique selling point if everyone else is doing online badly at first, of course, but then they may actually, learn from others who have been doing it a long time. I just wonder what your take was on that. I mean, I say the OU, but this education institution.
Yeah, I think I think that's one scenario. That suddenly everyone switches online, and I think what's the OU's point there? But actually, the OU lost its monopoly in some ways a long time ago when online came along. As soon as the web was a popular thing, lots of universities got into that space. So we had the sort of space on the monopoly on distance ed. I think, but. I mean, who knows? I mean, I'm sort of Shirley asked me to predict the future. I'm not doing that. But I think, there are different scenarios. And one of them is that I don't think most universities will go fully online. I think they'll go with this kind of blended approach of, so my daughter starts in Swansea probably in September. And it's like, no big lectures, small groups, some stuff online. And actually, that might be a better online experience than a better campus experience than sort of sitting in big lecture hall. So I think that kind of blended approach is still going to be different. But I think one thing that it does reveal is a lot of the kind of frailties and weaknesses in the current system. I mentioned exams as an example of that. So I think lots of people might want to devise systems that are more robust, like even if it's not for COVID-19, it's for the next thing that comes along, that they need to kind of to adapt to and change to. And distance education is just a much more robust model, I think, more resilient in many ways. And I think that the problem is it's expensive to run both systems simultaneously, to run them both well, a kind of fully distance ed and a fully campus experience. So another scenario is that actually more people want to partner with us, so actually we'll allow transfer of credits between OU courses and stuff and offer those to our students, So we have a lot more students who are studying at campus, but also taking options with us, which wouldn't be a bad model for us. And it's something we've pushed before. So I know what you mean. I think we could, at the moment, we're trying to be really helpful and offer expertise and services, but you could be creating your own competitor in a way. But I still think that actually, because just the kind of finances in many ways, it's difficult to run both those systems effectively.
I had a really amusing experience at Coventry. It was an MA on, I was teaching the computer-assisted language learning module, and students had to do a presentation face-to-face, which of course we then had to move. And everyone was telling me, they have to record a video of the presentation and submit it to you. And I said, no, they're going to do it on Big Blue Button. They're going to do it live with me there, with all the rest of the students there to comment and to ask questions. And basically, they got really angry because I said to the students they could do this, and they were like, no, you cannot do this. It's cannot possibly run. It's never going to work. So of course I ran it, and someone came to oversee it with me because they still didn't trust me. And when it ran perfectly, they suddenly went, "Oh, you can do that." Yeah. But it's amazing. And of course, then they started talking about that as really innovative.
So were there concerns? So were there concerns around sort of quality control? Was that their issue in you running it like that?
I think they just thought people, students wouldn't talk, or they'd feel too threatened or panicked, and that the technology would obviously fail. But I had a very tight script of instructions of what to say, and the kind of things that we've always done, and what to do in case something goes wrong, blah blah blah. But what really killed me was this is so innovative, and it was really a case of, do you people have you not been paying attention to the stuff that's been done at the OU for the last blah 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 years? Because they really thought suddenly that like I just invented the wheel, seriously. And it's like, no, I really haven't. But all these people read our papers,
pulling my hair out
from them, and it's like they don't believe it's actually true. And that's what really kind of shocked me. It's like, look, you've read the kind of stuff that we've all written on this, but somehow you just didn't believe us. It was bizarre. Anyway, I'll stop hogging the mic. And but thank you very much, Martin. Great to see you.
Good to hear from you again, Fernando. Take care, mate.
Indeed, I think we should probably thank Martin for a great talk and introducing your book, Martin. So go out there and get a copy, everybody. Remix the cover and get into a conversation with Martin. We will. We've got a couple of comments coming in, so Martin might want to have a response to those. And we should have a small break before the 1 o'clock session, which is carrying on afterwards. So thank you again, Martin. Thanks for coming to talk about your book. Perhaps stick around, see if there's any questions come up. And we should encourage everybody to stretch their legs and then come back at 1 o'clock for the afternoon session. We have the Doctoral Consortium with some talks and posters and 2 sessions this afternoon, so I do hope you can join us. The first one on open online education, which Martin might have a few thoughts about, and the second one on empowering learners. So do join us from 1 o'clock, or feel free to stick around and have a chat here or in the team space. Thank you, Martin.
Hi, Vicky, are you there?